When you have more data, you have more freedom. Freedom to do whatever. That's why AT&T is offering you 15 gigabytes for the price of 10. That's 5 extra gigs for the same price. Because the more data you have, the more freedom you have. Freedom to share what matters with who matters, like videos, music, and gaming. AT&T, mobilizing your world.
Limited time offer. Must sign up for this new mobile share value plan available at select locations. Restrictions apply. Visit an AT&T store to learn more.
This is the Seahawks Show on the Happy Hour Network.
Touchdown, Seahawks!
Your hosts are Kevin Daggett.
I'm here so I won't get fined.
And Lee Vowell.
I mean, he gets hit in his knees and he's about to cry. He my leg.
This is the show by Seahawks fans for Seahawks fans.
And Kurtz makes the catch, spins out of 1, spins out of 2, 10, 5! Touchdown, Seahawks!
Seahawks, the best team in football.
Marshawn gets the receiver at 320, 10, 5! Are you kidding me? Touchdown, Seahawks!
And welcome to the Seahawks Show on the Happy Hour Network. Follow us on the Twitter at Seahawks Show, at Dagstoy, at Lee Vowell. This week our guest will be Jacson Bevens of SB Nation's Field Gulls. And, Kevin, I actually think I'm going to have to start changing that intro because it ends with the best team in football, and they just aren't showing that so far this year, are they?
You know, that's funny. I was going to mention that, too. I'm like, yeah, not so much this year.
They're holding back. They're just, wait till we get those last 7 games and then whatever. So, obviously the Seahawks, if you're listening to the show, you're probably a Seahawks fan. The Seahawks lost 39-32 to the Cardinals last night. Really just an ugly game. The Cardinals dominated time of possession. We're talking just before the show, 39-32, but Kevin, I don't know how it felt for you, but for me it felt like, even though it was close, they came back, they got the lead, and I was thinking they're not going to hold this lead. And it really felt like it was like, I don't know, it was like a Big 12 game almost, but it felt like it was like 45-25. I didn't feel like they were ever going to win. I never in the game thought they were going to win. What do you think?
No, I really didn't either. And when they got it, they got the lead, and then Arizona got the ball back again. I'm like, this isn't over yet. I mean, because that defense really isn't stopping anything. So why would I think that they're not going to score again? And we're only, a field goal is going to win the game. And I had no confidence. I had confidence going into the game that we were going to win. I was thinking, you know what? They're not going to lose 2 in a row at home. They're pumped up. This is the Cardinals. It's a division rival. There's too much to win and too much to lose if they lose. And so, but as the game went on, I'm like, there is no confidence at all they're going to win this game.
Yeah, and you and I were texting. I guess it was yesterday before the game, and you're so much more positive, which is good. It's a much better trait than me being, whatever, they're going to lose. But, you seem positive, and I was just like, man, I got a bad feeling about this. Not because I knew. I was just like, I don't know. This whole season feels like it's just like a drone. It's just like we as Seahawks fans, we as Seahawks followers of the Seahawks, it just feels like they've never gotten really any momentum. Yeah, they won the last 2 games on the road, but who were they playing? San Francisco and Dallas, which just scored 6 points against Tampa. It was just, I don't know. It's just it feels like a lost season to me.
Well, nobody's afraid of him anymore. Cam Newton, his monkey was beating Seattle. He comes into Central Link Fields and beats Seattle. Arizona Cardinals, their monkey is beating Seattle. And what are they? No, people are not afraid of them. And they're marching down the field. They're putting together long, sustained drives on that defense. And that defense is not what it was the last 2 years. It's a completely different animal, in my opinion. That people did not march on them, and people did not score 39 points on them. I'll give credit to Carson Palmer, the Arizona Cardinals. That guy's good. he picked apart that defense. Those receivers were wide open in there, and those defensive backs and linebackers looked like they didn't know what was going on. I mean, I just don't think people are afraid of the Seahawks like they have been in the past couple of years. They're so, you know what, Seahawks are human. We're going after them, and we've watched enough film, and they're picking them apart.
Yeah, and the frustrating thing, we'll get a little bit more into individual players in just a minute, but it's just the inconsistency that they've gone through this year. It's like, even within the games, as we've talked about, you know, they have 2 good drives, like against Green Bay, to actually take the lead in the second half, and they have 2 good drives back-to-back, and like, yes, this is what the Seahawks have looked like. This is how they win games. And then, you know, they look so dominant versus San Francisco, but I think, you know, at that point in the season, San Francisco might be better next week when they play, but you know, I felt like we could get a group of guys here together and play San Francisco and shut them down. I mean, they looked horrible with Kaepernick at quarterback, and then they, you know, against Dallas, yeah, they only gave up 12 points and they won 13-12. But Dallas was able to, you know, before they had to throw the ball, they were moving the ball a little bit when they needed to, even though they ended up scoring 12 points. It's like that. Well, again, it goes back to Detroit, which had, you know, now they're 2-7, but you know, at that point they really should have beat Seattle, because it was a lucky play by Chancellor at the end and knocked the ball out. They've kept teams in the game.
Exactly. They barely beat Dallas, and Dallas has won 2 games. I mean, you know, that's hey, a win is a win, but you know, you beat San Francisco, who's horrible, and you beat Dallas, who's horrible, and you lose to Carolina, you lose to Cincinnati, you lose to Green Bay, you lose to Arizona. I mean, come on, guys. This is you're not playing well.
Yeah, and you know, we listen to 710 ESPN Seattle, and we keep hearing that, you know, they're positive for the most part. I mean, Mike Salk not so much, but he's not negative all the time. But you know, they keep talking about, oh, a Dallas win. It was an ugly win, but a win is a win. But it's indicative of how the season has gone and where the Seahawks are. It's like, yes, they beat Dallas. They beat them 13-12. They beat them on the road, but they beat them without Tony Romo 13-12. It's just like, yes, happy to get that win, but moving forward into the season, it just doesn't look good. I think it could still make the playoffs. I mean, because there's so much mediocrity in Green Bay for some reason, decided to lose every game too. But you know, let's get a little bit more into specifics as far as Darrell Bevell, for instance. You know, it seemed like when they came out last night, their idea was to pass the ball. We're going to throw for whatever reason. And then when they actually ran Lynch, at one point, you know, at halftime, I think he actually had a 7.2 average per carry. But they never really it just their play calling is inconsistent. It's like, okay, we're moving the ball. We got some good runs. You know, the Cardinals did an excellent job, by the way, of making sure Russell didn't roll to his right. They kept him rolling left, and he's not good when he does that. But what do you think about Bevell's job overall, just as far as play calling? I mean, it seems extremely inconsistent within the game. Not even game to game, but within the game. What do you think about Bevell's job?
It is inconsistent, and I don't understand what Lynch barely had 40 yards last night. I mean, I don't understand that. He's Marshawn Lynch. You're a running football team. It's almost like they're trying to change to go to this passing offense, which they're not. They don't have, you know, Russell Wilson is not Aaron Rodgers. He's not Carson Palmer. He's not Andy Dalton. And, you know, he's got some weapons coming back now. Paul Richardson got hurt again, which that's not good to hear. But I don't know. You're a run-first team. Establish that run. Give it to Marshawn Lynch. Feed him. He gets better as the game goes on. And I don't understand coming out and throwing it 3 times in a row. What? The Seahawks throwing it 3 times? What the hell is that? I mean, that's not the team that I've been watching for the last couple of years. No, so I don't know what Bevell's doing. And then when they get, it seems like every time when they get in the red zone, he's almost afraid to throw the ball, so he runs it every time. Yep. So doesn't want to get criticized for not giving the ball to Lynch, but it's very, like you said, it is very inconsistent. I don't understand it.
You know, when they scored that touchdown with Tugawafu, it was almost like when they had that 4th down, you know they're going to give him the ball because they're like, oh, the last time we ran a play, it worked. Let's do the same thing. And he got the 1st down on that 4th and short, but he really didn't get it. at least in that one last replay. But it was like, use some imagination. Yeah, you're right about Lynch had 42 yards on 8 carries. 8
carries. You have Marshawn Lynch on your team, guys.
Yep. 5.3 yards per carry. So it's not like he was getting stuffed every time. I mean, it was. I don't understand it. Like as we said, they came out. They were throwing the ball, but then they never went to Marshawn. I mean, Marshawn should have 8 carries in the first 2 drives of every game.
Yeah, I will say this. We did put – there was a couple holding penalties. I don't know if you saw those. But they put themselves on first down. There was how many first and over 20s did they have?
Oh, my gosh.
In that situation, when you start off putting yourself in that, it seemed like every penalty they had on the offense was on first down, and every penalty they had on defense was on third down. They gave him a first down. It's like, ridiculous.
Yes. Seattle had 115 yards rushing last night. They had 131 yards in penalties. They had 14 penalties, which is, Arizona had 9. The officiating, and we'll get into this in just a second if we have time before we're joined by Jacson Bevens at the top of the hour, but the officiating overall in the NFL, it's awful. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying the penalties against Seattle, but some of the penalties were like, even the ones against Arizona, it was like, or, for instance, when the tight end for the Cardinals caught the ball, he caught the ball. He moved forward. He took 2 steps. Oh, no, it wasn't a fumble. It was like, how is that not a fumble? It's crazy. Yeah. It's like the Beckham play yesterday.
Exact same play Odell Beckham did, and it was close to the Jimmy Graham drop in the end zone earlier in the game. I mean, if you looked at that, Graham, he's in the end zone. I don't know what the deal is, but that 14 penalties, 100, that's almost 10 yards a penalty. Those aren't motion penalties or offside penalties. Those are big ones.
Yeah, they were.
Drive killers.
It was awful. How they scored? Well, they scored 32 because the defense scored a touchdown and really set them up for 2. The defense really scored 2 touchdowns because they had that short 3-yard touchdown run, and so really 14 of the points, 14 of the 32 were for the defense. But Russell, for whatever reason, he's not having a good year. Even though his raw numbers earlier in the year were really good, he doesn't look like the same quarterback, and he should be. There's no reason for it, as far as I can tell. In fact, he's added Jimmy Graham, who he loves throwing the ball to, so he can drop it. And it's just, I don't know. It's Russell. I'm just so frustrated at this point in the season. It's not because the Seahawks, if they were mediocre or they weren't good, we didn't expect them to be good. That would be one thing. But they're the Seahawks. They've been to back-to-back Super Bowls. They didn't lose that much this offseason to be 4-5 at this point in the season. They just don't look like the same team. So your thoughts on Russell's play last night? It was awful, 14 of 32. A lot of that's not his fault necessarily. As you pointed out, it's first and 20s. You're not going to be able to complete a high percentage of passes, at least not for a lot of yards. But what do you think about Russell's play last night and really overall for this season?
I don't think he's not earning his money. Some of those, he threw a grounding call, throwing it away. He's got to pick up the blitz better than that. He can't do it. Jimmy Graham dropped 3 passes. I'll tell you, Doug Baldwin sure turned out to be a key receiver. Did he even hit Jermaine Kearse last night, or was he even on the field? I don't remember seeing him.
He had 1 target, I think. He was covered, so it wasn't his fault. The funny thing is, do you know how many drops Doug Baldwin has this season?
Does he have any?
0. He has 0 drops.
Yeah.
And Kearse has 1.
He's the man.
I know, but it's like, it's weird because you look at ESPN had this thing where the top 10 receivers in the league, and they weren't saying these guys are, skill set puts them head and shoulders above everybody else, but they had Doug Baldwin was actually number 1 on their list. And Kearse was in the top 10, or number 11, I take that back. And the reason was because they blocked they didn't drop any passes. They maximized most of the attempts they had because a lot of them were long passes. And Baldwin had that play where he touchdown, long touchdown pass last night. But it was just like, it's frustrating because they get Jimmy Graham, and then he's not been good this year. Even when they've targeted him, he doesn't look like the same guy who played in New Orleans. I mean, 3 drops last night, and 2 of those you and I would have caught. I mean,
that's the funny thing is everybody's complaining because they're not throwing it to Jimmy Graham. When Baldwin and Kearse are the ones who we should be throwing to, they're catching the ball and getting yards. I don't, Wilson. I don't know what to. I mean, their people are putting pressure on them. That offensive line is not good, and they obviously those holding penalties. When you're getting beat off the line, I guess you got to hold. And I guess in the NFL though, you could probably call a holding penalty on every play, but some of those are pretty obvious. I think that face mask call on Gilliam, I don't know where that came from, but something's got to be done with that offense. That's not a Super Bowl contending offensive line at this point, I don't think.
Yeah, I even think the offense overall it's what I think is, because where we live now, I think what happens is that coaching staff, except for Carroll, I think that coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff of the Seahawks, warms up every week by offensively coaching the Tennessee Volunteers. I think that's what happens.
Yeah.
Because they figured, what, we got this guy, this running quarterback, and then it's whatever. And Richard Sherman, especially first 3 quarters of the game last night, he looked bad. I don't know. It's frustrating. Again, it's frustrating because these are the same guys that we have been watching the last few years, and it's like, for some reason, are they suddenly not good? Is it that they have Sherman covering Fitzgerald last time? Fitzgerald just toasted him several times. Is it the
God.
What's up with
I don't know. They had one. Yeah, Sherman he was not good at all, and he just stands there and looks. I'm a Seattle Supersonics fan, and one of my favorite players is Gary Payton. And every time Gary Payton got called for a foul, he'd stand there and put his hands on his hips and look at the ref like, I didn't foul anybody. And that's the way Sherman looked. He's put his hands on his hips like, what are you talking about? But, there was that one play where I think it was Floyd got by 3 defenders. It's like, I don't know if the communication's not there, but they get this. Those defensive backs are getting smoked. I mean, again, tight end gets a touchdown yesterday. And then Sherman made a bad move on that one play. He had him covered, but he made a bad move and jumped off a step. But, I don't know. Richard Sherman is not the best cornerback in the league right now.
No, I don't. Yeah, I mean, Williams has not played well either, but Williams hasn't played any worse, or Sherman hasn't played any better than Williams, I guess is how I should say that, really. Overall,
no, and Williams
for the majority.
Williams, they're going after Williams a lot more because of Sherman. And I tell you what, did Carson Palmer seem afraid of Sherman last night? Not one bit. He went right after him. And if you think about it this year, as the year goes on, Cam Newton wasn't afraid of him either. I mean, I just don't know if maybe the Seahawks aren't as good this year as we expected them to be or we thought they were. I know our expectations have been high, but maybe they're just not that good. And like you said, a lot of the players are the same, but there are some missing links in that coaching staff with Quinn and Norton. I don't know if that's a factor, but a lot of times that defense just seems to. 39 points. What the? L2 was a safety, but 37 points.
When they could have had more because Palmer threw the interception to Earl Thomas in the end zone.
Yeah.
That should have been at least 3. So
man.
So when I was making this, the outline for the show, there's got to be some positives. I mean, they did score 32 points, but I was thinking, the Cardinals have a tough schedule over the next 7, but at this point they're not going to catch the Cardinals, but they're actually right there with the Rams in their own division, and then we look at the other, teams that are in the NFC, and we see the Packers falling back, but the key there is the Packers have a game up because they won head-to-head. some of the other teams are not. I mean, the Seahawks could, if they play well, if they win 6, or they win out, which is something they have done. They did last year, and they've played really well normally. Second half of seasons, they can actually play well enough to put themselves in a position to make the playoffs. But one thing I came away with was, hey, if nothing else, they have a better draft position than they have had. Maybe they'll, get an offensive lineman this time, or something. Because
they won't be able to afford to pay him.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. I was like, what do they do next year? Because a lot of these guys who they're on paper very good players, and they've been very good players the last few years. But this year, Chancellor was in on 19 tackles yesterday. When your safety is in on 19 tackles, something is way wrong, first of all.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Sherman is not Sherman, and Wilson is now signed, and he's not been Russell Wilson, and Lynch will probably be gone after this. There's no way I see Marshawn Lynch returning to this team next year. Why would he? So
there's no reason.
What are we looking at the next 2 years, in your opinion? The same thing, or the team going to get better?
That's a good question. I think I saw Chancellor was playing up on the line quite a bit last night too. So I think some of those tackles were from him playing up and not playing back. But yeah, I think there's going to be some shakeup. I don't know. Pete Carroll's got one more year, doesn't he, on his contract? I think, and then there's got to be some shakeups. I mean, they're paying a few people a lot of money. There's not much to go around, and I don't know. This happened to the Saints a few years back after they won the Super Bowl and paid people all that money. They kind of went in the tank after that, and they're having a hard time pulling back. I don't know if that's something that's going to happen to Seattle, but they've got to do some improvements on that offensive line. Those guys are just not cutting it at all. I mean, when Okun goes down and Alvin Bailey comes in, it's like, oh, really? Oh, there we go, the human traffic cone. I mean, it's like, goodness gracious. But,
and the problem is Okun, he's not really that good either. I mean, he's hurt so much. I don't know. Well, let's moving on to more general NFL news. Which is worse, the Saints defense or Peyton Manning at this point?
Yeah, that's a crapshoot right there. You know what? I can't. I understand. I guess if he benched Manning yesterday, I guess because of his injury that nobody knew about. But they were only down by 22 points. How do you? I mean, and of course Manning threw 4 interceptions. That's right. But 22 points. I mean, really, Peyton Manning can score 22 points in about 4 minutes if in the vintage Peyton Manning. But we pulled him. I was kind of surprised, but then, we found out there was an injury, so maybe that had something to do with it. But that Saints aren't very good. That's one good thing. You were talking about Seahawks making the playoffs. I really think the best they're going to do, they'll be lucky to do it, is 9-7. I really don't. I mean, I don't see them. I see at least 2 more losses in these last few games. But the good news is the rest of the NFC is not that good. And, Atlanta's going down. Green Bay's on a downward slide. So, but still, then when you get to the playoffs, what happens? Your team's not that good. I mean, they're just not – they're not playing – they don't give me the confidence. When I watch the game, I don't have the confidence like I did last year that they can win this game. They can pull it out. They can finish the job. That defense yesterday, they came in out of halftime and just started blitzing and putting pressure, and look what they got. They got the 2 strip sacks, and then what they do on that last drive Arizona had, they didn't blitz anymore. They went back to the 4-man rush, and what happened? They started picking that defense apart, and I didn't understand that. Why'd you let up? Was the defense tired, or I mean, why did you change the game plan when what you were doing was working? I don't know.
Well, this is what it sounded like when Bobby Wagner returned that fumble for a touchdown.
Here a 3rd and 5 from his own 33. A trip to the right. Palmer out of the shotgun. Takes the snap. Here comes the blitz. Palmer gets hit. Ball comes down. It's picked up. Going the other way. It's going to be a touchdown. Seahawks Are you kidding me, Bobby Wagner? The Seahawks defense finds a way to do it. They force the fumble. Wagner picks it up the second time this season he's done it. And he goes in for the touchdown. And the Seahawks have taken the lead 29-25.
And just to piggyback more onto what you were saying, they did that, and then this happened.
Seattle leads by 4. Palmer out of the shotgun. 2 receivers near side. He takes the snap. He looks. He throws to the end zone. In the back of the end zone, it's a catch for a touchdown by Jermaine Gresham of Arizona.
So, Kevin, I'll ask you, are you thinking about maybe quitting your job and getting a job as a tight end on whoever the Seahawks are playing every week? You could just change teams every week, right? I mean, you'd be making tons of money by the end of the season, right?
And making tons of catches and tons of touchdowns, too. I mean, it's like a sieve back there for the tight ends. And you got little Earl Thomas trying to cover those, jump up. I shot the replay of him jumping up. I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah.
He jumped as high as he could.
As great as Thomas is, I mean, it's asking too much of him to do what he's, I don't know. It's just, so let's look at the NFC wild card picture currently. Obviously, it's 9 games into the season, a lot of season left to play for everybody, but 7 games left. Green Bay and Atlanta currently hold the wild card positions in the NFC. They're 2 games up over, are you ready for this? Washington, Tampa Bay, seriously, St. Louis, Seattle, Philadelphia, and Chicago. And then New Orleans.
Yeah, all 4 and 5.
Yep, and New Orleans is 4 and 6, 2.5 games out. And it's just like, that's a lot of teams bunched up. I mean, again, it's only 9 games in, but you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams at 4 and 5, 2 games out. At this point, Green Bay and Atlanta, Green Bay's got to start playing better, surely. Atlanta, I'm not sure about. I mean, they started off so well, but who knows, where it's gonna go. But we're going to be joined by Jacson Bevens in just a few moments to talk about last night's game and some other things just surrounding the team in general. But, looking at the Seattle Seahawks schedule the rest of the way, they play San Francisco Sunday. That should be a win, right?
Should be.
Especially at home, you'd think. Of course, they just lost at home. And then you've got Pittsburgh, who I don't know what you think about Ben Roethlisberger as a person. I won't say what I think about him as a person, but as a football player, this guy is, he's tough. And that's the only word for him. He comes in with the 2 broken legs yesterday and then throws for 300 yards.
He's a good backup, that's for sure, isn't he?
Yes, he is. But then they got San Francisco, Pittsburgh at home, and then they go on the road versus Minnesota. At this point, that looks like a loss.
Yeah, Minnesota's tough.
Yeah, 7-2, leading their division over the Packers currently by a game, and then they've got Baltimore on the road, which, again, on paper that should be a win, and then Cleveland should be a win because they've got them at home, and then they finish with St. Louis at home. St. Louis is just in the same place as Seattle because it's like, Seattle on paper probably has more talent, but they've been so up and down too. They had when they started off the season with that win over Seattle, they got to be thinking this is going to be a good year, and they're in the same boat, 4 and 5, and then they finish away at Arizona. They need to win. They need to win at least 6 of those games, I think, at this point. And Minnesota is a loss, and it could be that Arizona's in a position
Arizona
where
at Arizona. That's definitely in Arizona's favor, I would say.
Yeah, I'm just kind of hoping they're in the position where they can rest their players and they don't need that win, and sort of allow. Of course, they might be thinking if we can keep Seattle out of the playoffs, that's a win-win for us. Not because they want to play Seattle again in the playoffs, because obviously they can beat them, but it's just like, hey, a division rival will put mud in their face by keeping them out of the playoffs as well. Who knows? Of course, Carson Palmer might be injured. I don't want Carson Palmer to be injured. He actually seems like a really good guy, but he has an injury history, and he's been healthy so far this entire season. So, it'll be interesting.
Speaking of injuries, Seattle doesn't even have that excuse. They're one of the healthiest teams in the NFL. I mean, their starting players, they're not all that injured. I mean, they've got a couple things here and there, but I mean they're not missing any key players to their main core. So that's not even an excuse.
I know. We were using that excuse. I think all Seahawks fans were, because we were kind of hopeful earlier in the season. But we were using that excuse the first two games where, there's no Cam, So if we should have beaten St. Louis if we'd had Cam. But Cam has been back, and they've been, Marshawn's been out, but Ross has done a phenomenal job when Lynch wasn't in there. So you can't blame it on the running game not producing, because it's just the players who we've expected to. They aren't who we thought they were, I guess, to borrow a phrase. But it's just very frustrating when you see those same players not producing at the level that we're expecting them to play. And it's just, but again, there's try to be positive. There are 7 games left in the season, and they are 2 games back along with everybody else. They don't have to jump anybody other than the 2 teams that are in position to actually make the playoffs at this point. So they're not having to jump several thousand teams to make the playoffs. A couple other things before we're joined by Jacson Bevens. Can you define what a catch is, Kevin, in the NFL?
Jeez, I tell you what, I don't know that anybody can. I mean, it's, I will tell you this, that in that New York game, when they got the announcer, they got Mike Carey on. He was the official guy. He was definitely, he goes, that is not a catch, and he explained why. Mike Carey knows what a catch is. I don't know that the rest of the league knows what a catch is, but it is so frustrating. I guess it's got to be frustrating as a receiver and a coach to just really not know what it is, and the officials seem really confused. I really do like instant replay. It's making the officials make a definitive call, and they'll call it. Okay, we're going to call the touchdown because we know we're going to review it and we're going to get the call right. So, but yeah, they need to redo that, I think, and I imagine they will. What's a catch? What's a football move? I guess. I mean, what is a football move? I don't even. It sounds kind of fancy, but what is that? I don't even know.
Even the football move, I thought I knew what that was. I thought it was when you caught the ball and then you took a step with controlling the ball, and then at least one step. I mean, Beckham, I don't know. It's that was a catch. I don't know, if there hasn't been.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know if the NFL feels like they owe the Patriots because they put them through all that unnecessary stuff that they put the Patriots through because of the cover-up and the deflating the balls or whatever. And it's like, no, now we're going to let you win every game. Obviously, the Patriots are a very good team, and I'm half joking. But yesterday, that should have been a loss. They should have lost yesterday. It should have been a touchdown pass. Obviously, Beckham came out and said the right thing today, which was, oh, you know what? We should have never been in the position where the Patriots were able to win the game. We should have easily won because they were up by, I think it was 2 touchdowns, right? 24-10.
Right.
But that touchdown catch would have definitely, put the game away. I mean, there's no other way of saying it, because then the Patriots barely had time to go down and kick that 54-yard field goal and tie or win the game. It was just, I don't know. There were so many. So besides the catches and besides the penalties, the holding penalties on the Seahawks, it's just really frustrating at this point to watch the NFL. As far as, because you and I are, we're not young, we're not old, but we're not young, but we're used to watching the game when there was no instant replay. And I'm not saying instant replay is necessarily a bad thing, but you see something and that's a touchdown. Then instant replay, it's like the officials are afraid to make a call because they know that instant replay is going to come back and be like, well, maybe we shouldn't have called it that way. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and back in the day, they used to let them play a lot more. There was a lot more, pushing and shoving, and but they've, from the defenders, and I guess they want it to be a lot more offensive game, so they're tying the hands of the defensive players a lot more. And I'm not saying that Richard Sherman doesn't pass interference hold because he does. But, it's just if you look at, back in Lester Hayes and those guys and Kenny Easley, those guys back then, that was a whole different deal back then. And the receivers are a lot bigger than they used to be. And it's just a whole different game. Instant replay, I'm all about getting the plays right. And but when you don't get it, when you have instant replay and you don't get what most fans think is right, and you try to explain why we called it the way they did, and the fans are still like, what are you talking about? Even the announcers are, what are you talking about? You say that, that's when it gets a little confusing. I love, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. They're so funny about that.
Yeah,
Did you hear Collinsworth towards the end of the game last night? He said he was talking about Tom Cable, and I'm going on Twitter, and all these Seahawks people are just ripping Tom Cable, and Chris Collinsworth gets on the air, and he says, "Yeah, that Tom Cable, boy, he's done a fantastic job. That offensive line sure has improved." I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I think they do what I do sometimes. They just say stuff, and they're like, "Oh, what did I just say? Maybe I shouldn't have said that." So I don't know. Bob Condata actually has basically based on Pro Football Focus from last night. These are some things he's pointed out. On the offense, Arizona blitzed Russell Wilson on 17 of his 40 dropbacks, with Wilson grading at negative 2.0 on those throws with a completion rate of 28.6. Tight end Jimmy Graham graded at negative 4.7, the worst of his career. He was targeted 8 times and had 2 drops. I counted 3 drops. I think he's counting the
3
one.
Also.
Yeah, I think what he's doing is he's counting the one that they just ruled incomplete as not a drop. I think that's what he's doing with the touchdown. They're saying he was knocked out of his hands or something. I'm not sure. The tackles graded out actually pretty well. Gary Gilliam at plus 2.3 and Russell Okung at plus 1.4. Both their grades were boosted by their good pass blocking. I'm not sure how that was. The interior of the line was a different story. Justin Britt, Patrick Lewis, and J.R. Sweezy combined for 11 quarterback hurries. The targets for the game, Doug Baldwin had 10, and he produced. He had a big night. Jimmy Graham had 8. Chris Matthews, Jermaine Kearse, and Marshawn Lynch had 2 each as far as targets go. And then on defense, Cliff Averill was a plus 6.1, Michael Bennett plus 5.9, dominated the game, each registering 5 quarterback hurries, both ranked in the top 3 for 4-3 defensive end grading and quarterback hurries. The secondary got torched, as we know.
Yeah, they did.
Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor all allowed 5 receptions, including Williams. The 4 of them graded. It's funny that he didn't say Williams, including in that first trio there. Including Williams, the 4 of them graded at a combined negative 5.8. Palmer attempted 18 throws over 10 yards and connected on 14 of them. And as far as defensive stops, and I believe this is more like stops at the line of scrimmage or tackles for loss. Bobby Wagner had 6, Averill had 4, and Cam Chancellor had 3. Quarterback hurries, Averill, Bennett each had 5. Reuben and Jordan Hill had 4, and KJ Wright had 3. And as far as coverage targets, how many times they were targeted in coverage, Richard Sherman, Bobby Wagner, 8 each. So as you pointed out, they definitely aren't afraid to throw towards Sherman because they did it more than anybody else, along with the linebacker. Kerry Williams, Earl Thomas, 6, and Chancellor and KJ Wright had 5. And then finally, his signature stats that he pointed out, Wilson had the second worst completion rate for Week 10 of anybody in the NFL at 43.8%. Not sure who was worse. I should have looked that up. On throws over 20 yards, Carson Palmer had Week 10 leading 75% accuracy rate, connecting for 3 touchdowns. Along with the season-high plus 2.5 overall grade, Doug Baldwin had a 3.62 yards per reception that currently ranks 4th among wide receivers this week so far, going into tonight's game. The Cardinals have 2 players in the top 10, Floyd and Fitzgerald, so that shows you how bad the secondary was last night. And then the offensive line allowed 17 quarterback hurries, but the Cardinals allowed nearly 30, which, did you have any idea it was that much? I had no idea.
They allowed 30 hurries?
Yeah, 30 hurries. So actually at this time we are going to be joined by Jacson Bevens. Jacson writes that thing you like at fieldgoals.com and can be found on Twitter at Jacson Bevens. Jacson, thanks for being on today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be on with you.
I appreciate it. So as far as the game last night, and I'm Lee and Kevin was with me just to let you know. As far as the game last night, what are your 2 or 3 biggest takeaways from what you saw?
The number one takeaway is that the Cardinals are really good. You know, we've sort of fallen into this assumption that they're a smoke and mirrors outfit, you know, with a couple of hot starts, but really since Kurt Warner left, they've never really been able to turn that into anything substantial. But this team loaded up on talent in the offseason. Carson Palmer is playing the best football of his career right now, and he's got a coach and receiver, you know, receiving core that are capable of playing to his strengths, you know, and that's what we're seeing. He loves to throw vertically. Bruce Arians loves to throw vertically. He's got huge receivers, and the receivers that aren't huge are really fast. So it sets up really nicely for them. I thought their offensive line played really well, as was evidenced by their 30 first downs. You know, the defense has obviously been great this year at all 3 levels. So my biggest takeaway is that the Cardinals are really good. My second takeaway is that I still can't figure out how good this Seahawks team is. And that's weird because, you know, we've always kind of known from year to year if they were good or not good since Pete Carroll got here. And this year, you know, they haven't beat anyone good yet, but they've almost beaten everybody good that they play. So that's a really tough one, you know, to make out. And then the third thing is the penalties, and I'm usually pretty loath to talk about penalties just because they are so arbitrary and random, and it's such a difficult game to police. You know, the NFL rule book has quadrupled in size over the last 15 years or so. So it's just a much harder game to officiate now, plus players are bigger and faster. For the second consecutive season, Seahawks opponents are being penalized less than any other team's opponents in the NFL. And the odds against that happening in a vacuum are 1 in 1,024. So that part of it is pretty peculiar to me. You know, my initial impression last night was just that the refs were a little bit in over their heads with that game because they were missing a lot on both sides. But, you know, over a 24-game stretch, those things should even out. And for Seattle's opponents to be getting called less than anybody else for 2 straight seasons is a little peculiar.
Yeah, all those points are great. And I agree with you. That Cardinals team is good, and Carson Palmer is good. I had no idea. I mean, that guy was that good. And you know, I wonder what they would have done in the playoffs last year if he was playing. But
totally.
Now, I probably should wait for this question for the end of the interview, but I'm going to get it out of the way right now. What do you think? What do you think the chances of Seahawks make the playoffs this year after that loss last night?
Not great, but better than any other 4 and 5 team. You know, the number 1 seed has obviously been out of the picture for a while. The division is now out of the picture. Yeah, I know they were down by 3 games to the Cardinals at this point last year also, but these Cardinals are not those Cardinals. And so now we're looking at a wild card. And they're 2 games back of both wild card teams, Green Bay and Atlanta at 6-3. Green Bay holds the tiebreaker for winning the head-to-head back in week 2, so they're really 2.5 games behind Green Bay. And for as bad as they've looked the last 3 weeks, I don't see Seattle being 3 games better than them over the remaining 7 games that they have to play. So we're really talking about, can they catch the Falcons do benefit from a fairly easy schedule from here on out, but I don't think they're as good as their record. So, when we're looking at whether Seattle makes this playoff, it's really going to be the Falcons that they're chasing. And I think that they are definitely catchable. And if it feels like 2 games is too much or 4-5 is too slow of a start to make up, keep in mind that the 3 best records in the NFC at this point last year were the Cardinals, the Lions, and the Eagles. And none of them made it past the first round of the playoffs. All of them struggled down the stretch. The Cardinals were 9-1. I think they finished 10-6, maybe 11-5. The Eagles were 7-2. They finished 10-6. The Lions were 7-2. I think they finished 10-6. So there's a lot of carnage still to take place. NFL season is definitely a war of attrition. There's a lot of injuries that are going to happen between now and the end of the year. So, 2 games isn't a ton to make up, but the margin for error has gotten really small. I think Seattle is going to have to win 6 of their last 7.
Yeah, I do too. And I just that's a tall order in my opinion. The way this team's been playing, I mean, it just seems like they can't finish games. Like you said, they've almost beaten good teams, but not quite. Now, I don't think anybody expected this team to be 4-5, obviously, at this point in the season. And if you were Pete Carroll at this point, what are a couple things that you'd try to fix right now?
That's really difficult because I think the weaknesses are pretty apparent, and the biggest one, of course, is the offensive line. Russell Wilson came into last night's game with the highest pressure percentage in NFL history. Now, some of that is him holding the ball too long, being too quick to leave the pocket, not trusting his first read, receivers not getting open on time, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of it is the fact that the offensive line is just really overmatched. And you can't really do anything about that. You just have to stick with these guys. There's not a ton of talented offensive linemen just waiting around for a phone call, and even if there were, it takes a while to get acclimated to a new system and figure out the guys around you. So I don't think you can do much about the offensive line, which is the biggest issue this team faces. It's hard to judge Darrell Bevell or Russell Wilson or Jimmy Graham or whoever when, the very, foundation of the plays you're trying to call crumbles right away. So that's the biggest one. I think Seahawks fans just going to have to ride that out. I just can't see this team winning a Super Bowl with that offensive line. It is what it is. The thing that's really disconcerting is the secondary. And they've been largely great, but when they haven't been great, it's been at the worst time. And most peculiarly, it's been when they know the other team has to pass, which when it got to that point the last 3 years, I mean, you guys know it was lick your chops time. It was time to pad the stats, get some sacks, get some picks, really put the pressure on. And now it's like I can't point to any really tangible structural differences in the Chris Richard defense, but there just seems to be more space between defenders than there was before. So I'm not sure if opposing coordinators have figured something out via combo routes to get guys open or if it's a communication issue. But Seattle is getting beat with the strength of their defense. Teams are throwing right into the teeth of that Legion of Boom and coming away with a ton of success. So, those are the 2 biggest things, but I don't know how you go about addressing them. One of the issues is definitely a lack of talent, but that's not the case with the secondary, And I don't know if it's schematic or what. It's really baffling. I wish I had a better answer, but I'm not answering your question. I'm not sure what Pete Carroll tells these guys, other than to say that, I'm a big believer in what I call the 98% rule. I believe that everyone in the NFL, all the teams are sharing 98% of the same talent. All the coaches know 98% of the same strategy. It's game flow is really similar from game to game. 98% of the plays are more or less a wash. So it's who can win those 2%, right? And for 2.5 years, the Seahawks have been winning those 2%, making the big plays when they needed to. Their record in close games have been sensational, coming back when they need to come back, getting the big defensive play when they need the big defensive play. And those plays are the ones that are missing. They haven't been blown out. They haven't been supremely outclassed at all this year. They've been 1 or 2 plays away in every single loss. And that's a difficult thing because you're not sure if it's a mentality thing, if it's just a regression to the mean or what. But every single loss they've had there's been one or two either great plays by the opposition or a funky bounce or whatever that's gone against them. So I'm not sure how much of that is talent and how much of it is just chance.
Yeah, which actually brings me to my next question. Again, we're talking to Jacson Bevens of fieldgoals.com. Just about the job the coordinators are doing. You mentioned a little bit, Chris Richard, just schematically. Maybe it's not the scheme that he's doing. Maybe it's some of the communication, because obviously we saw some communication issues with especially covering tight ends early in the season again last night. And it just makes me – and he was blitzing a little bit more than they normally did too. And he's moving Sherman around more than they have. But as far as, last night, Darrell Bevell coming out, the game plan was to throw the ball. And then when Lynch ran it, he ran it pretty well, the first half of the game. But they never actually stuck with it. They kept going with the pass. What do you think about the jobs the coordinators, Bevell and Richard, are doing?
I'll preface this by saying the laziest argument that a fan can make is to blame play calling. Both offensively and defensively, there are so many factors that go into it that are different than when we play Madden or play fantasy football. They have to think about substitutions, player fatigue, different packages and this and that. So there's a lot to go into it. So I usually come to coordinators' defenses, especially when the overall body of work is favorable, as it has been with Bevell and with the Seahawks defenses. That said, I'm not so sure this year. The NFL is a league of adjustment. You can't just figure something out and stay on top for 15 years. You have to constantly be upgrading because, every other team is employing 25 coaches who are looking at 40, 50 hours of film a week. They're going to figure out what it is you're doing that makes you successful, and eventually teams are going to figure out how to poke and prod until they find a weakness. So, my concern is Seattle's inability to adapt. The inability to adapt to an offensive line that can't hold blocks for very long. The inability to make adjustments on defense, committing so heavily to just a four-man rush and we're going to drop seven guys into coverage and make the quarterback make great throws. Well, that's not working right now. Quarterbacks are anticipating things earlier. I think Tom Brady kind of exposed something against Seattle that, if you have to hold the ball for 3 seconds, you're not going to find any space. But if you can get it out in a second and a half or less, guys are open early against that zone defense, and it's true. So they haven't really figured out how to make that adjustment. One thing I did see last night that I liked was, for the first time in a long time, Chris Richard dialed up a lot of stunts and twists inside, and you saw, especially after Iupati left with the injury, that consistently in that third quarter, early fourth quarter, there were guys coming free, untouched, just confusion on the offensive line based on a different scheme Seattle started running. But then Arizona made the adjustment, and Seattle never adjusted to that adjustment and got back to winning those battles. So I do have to question both sides' abilities to make adjustments to a league that I think is catching up to what the Seahawks have been doing.
Jack, you touched on that secondary and some of the difficulties back there, and it is kind of mind-boggling what's going on back there. And there is, I noticed last night there seemed to be more than any game this season wide open receivers. 5-10 yards in between them. And I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but do you have any idea what's going on with Sherman this year? He's not the Richard Sherman that we saw last year or in the Super Bowl. And it seems to me like, Carson Palmer obviously was not afraid to go at him. Cam Newton's not afraid to go at him. Are quarterbacks just not afraid to go that way? Or do you have any idea what his issues are?
Yeah, I don't think that he's playing as well this year as he has in the past. That said, I still think we're talking about one of the 3 or 4 best cornerbacks in the NFL. I don't think that he has gotten bad. He's dropped some interceptions this year, 3 or 4, which is really unusual because he's definitely been an all-about-the-ball type of player his first 4 years in the league. The thing that is really confusing to me is something I heard you guys touch on earlier, which is that communication is off. The communication in the Legion of Boom has been almost telepathic the last 3 years. And this year, it just hasn't been. It's been very wrong. To Richard Sherman's credit, it sounds like he was the only guy who got the defensive call right against Carolina when Greg Olsen scored that wide-open game-winning touchdown, and everyone was kind of pointing at each other. But it's that kind of thing. I mean, it used to be that play call moves through the defense like electricity, and now it seems like it's getting kind of lost in translation. Guys not sure where they're supposed to be. You see a lot of kind of frantic hand signaling right before the snaps as guys are trying to communicate with each other. That's not something we're used to seeing. So I do think there is something about the kind of chain of command in terms of when that play call gets there. I don't know how much of that to put on Richard Sherman. Paul Thomas has admitted to not playing his best ball. It took Cam Chancellor a while to get up to speed. I actually think Terry Williams has been really good this year, but he's still the fourth best player in that secondary. So, when the other three guys aren't playing like all pros, it does make it tough. You realize how fortunate Seattle has been to be able to throw out a top 2, top 3 pass defense every year.
Yeah. And the question of the week, how do you define a catch in the NFL, and then follow that up with, what is a football move?
Yeah, that interpretation seems to be as frustrating to the officials as it is to everybody else. I think the best way to do this is to round up 108-year-olds and ask them what a catch is, and go from that, because it's gotten way too complicated. It's like the NFL referees have to be patent attorneys now and make sure that they cover every little footnote, and by the time they're done, they've lost the spirit of the rule in the first place. As far as I'm concerned, if you have the football and there are 2 feet in the field of play, you are now a runner. Don't worry about if you've had time to throw a spin move or turn up field or whatever. As soon as you've got the ball in your hands and 2 feet down, it's live. And if it means more fumbles, it means more fumbles. But at least we would know. And I think that's how I would go about it, is just get back to basics. Whatever a bunch of third graders can tell you a catch is a catch. It's not something that should be as difficult as it's become to figure out. And if the NFL doesn't come out of this next off season with something more definitive, I think that this could start to get really, really ugly. It's gotten so bad the last few years, and some high-profile catch, no-catch situations that have decided games. Obviously, the Des Bryant one, which, decided a couple of seasons in the NFC last year. That was a real shame, too. So I just hope that whatever they choose, it's something definitive and universal, and they don't have to go to New York 4 times a game to figure out what is and isn't a completion.
Very good answers. It was awesome having you on, Jacson. We'd love to have you on again.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
guys.
I appreciate it. Will you let people know where you can be found?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Jacson Bevens. No K in Jacson, Jacson Bevens. You can also find my work at Field Gulls, which is run by Danny Kelly, and even before I was writing there, I thought it was the best website for Seahawks information analysis. So you can always look me up there. The title of my column is Cigar Thoughts, so feel free to search that way as well.
Yeah, awesome. You're a great read there, honestly. So thank you for being on, and, go Seahawks. Good luck next week.
Appreciate it, guys. Yeah, talk to you soon.
Right,
thanks, Jackson.
So actually, that's going to do it for our show today. Any final thoughts?
Well, I've still got hope that the Seahawks can get to the playoffs, and then once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. So, there is, like Jacson was talking about. We're dealing with a lot of 4 and 5 teams, and we are the best 4 and 5 team out there. And boy, if they went to the playoffs and Atlanta had to play Atlanta, I'll go to that game again because I'm sure it'll be down there. I'm sure it'll be in Atlanta.
That's right. All righty. Well, thanks, everybody, for listening. You can catch this replays at NGSC Sports. We're thankful that they rerun it. Also, I-95 Sports Network and, of course, Happy Hour Network. So hopefully we'll be talking next week. We'll be talking, actually, to Keith Myers again from 12th Man Rising, hopefully about a Seahawks win. Again, thanks to Jacson Bevens of Field Gulls for being on tonight. Have a great week, everyone, and go Seahawks.
When you have more data, you have more freedom. Freedom to do whatever. That's why AT&T is offering you 15 gigabytes for the price of 10. That's 5 extra gigs for the same price. Because the more data you have, the more freedom you have. Freedom to share what matters with who matters, like videos, music, and gaming. AT&T, mobilizing your world.
Limited time offer. Must sign up for this new mobile share value plan available at select locations. Restrictions apply. Visit an AT&T store to learn more.